While Kenyan MPs accepted the salaries given by the Salaries Remuneration Commission, their allowances go up to the equivalent of what they've always demanded. So have these demos lived up to their cause?
They got the message that we Kenyans think they're very greedy. They got that message loud and clear. And the symbolism of pigs and blood drove the point home. And right now we know that when you talk about greedy parliamentarians, they're known as MPigs. So in a way, we achieved what we're trying to do, communicate. And I think one of the greatest achievements that we had is that we got young people in the streets. We got young Kenyans, we got Kenyan Indians, we got white Kenyans, we got people from all ages to go to the streets. That was a big achievement.
Well, there we go. And remember, you can always be a part of this show. All you have to do is share your experiences with what's making news across the continent, and we'll be able to capture them and share them here on Africa Speaks. Now it's time for us to take a look at some of those moments captured by your cell phones and also shared across social media platforms, that is on Facebook, on Twitter, and all the other social media platforms. Just take a look at this week's click. This week on Click, we feature a picture shared on the Africa Speaks Facebook page weeks ago, and Seboliba posts a country where police battle it with harmless journalists who are seeking justice to the freedom of information. Welcome to Uganda. The picture shows foreign journalists fleeing tear gas canisters during the media siege, and he asks, what image are we selling beyond borders? And also, from this week, here's a picture tweeted during the Occupy Parliament Reloaded demonstrations at Parliament building in Kenya. Activists protested the members of Parliament demand for salary increment. It's an open call to you. You can capture those moments using your cell phones and share them with us. You can tag us into most of these pictures that you make moments out of, and that is on Facebook, Africa Speaks, and on Twitter at KTN Africa Speaks. We'll be able to share those moments right here on KTN's Africa Speaks. Now, it's time for us to get into the platform, and the platform is normally a segment of the show where we do focus on key issues across the African continent. And this week, we are focusing on Somalia. Rebuilding Somalia, what is it going to take for Somalia to get back on her feet? And can we actually comfortably say Somalia is finally back on her feet? That's a question we're posing to you. And remember, you can use the hashtag Africa Speaks on Twitter, or you can use the hashtag Rebuilding Somalia, and we'll be able to capture some of those tweets and responses in regard to today's topic. But well, let's just start by taking a look at a story that was done by KTN's Angel Katusia a while ago. It was about repatriation of Somalis and asking Somali nationals to get back home so that they can be able to build Somalia as well. Just take a look at this story before we can get to talking to our guests.
Ali runs a thriving clothing business in Nairobi's Eastleigh estate. He fled his war-torn country in 2002 and sought refuge at the Dadaab refugee camp before coming here. He is unsettled by the latest move to return refugees like him to Somalia.
Amekuja 2002 kutoka kwao, na kitu ambaye imemlete ni ile mambo ilikuwa hakuna amani katika kwao, ilikuwa vita, ilikuwa nini. Sasa alikuja kama mkimbizi.
Ali got official documents to live in Kenya as a refugee, but decided to do business, marry and settle here. He has been running this shop since 2006. Then came the wave of terror attacks after Kenyan troops entered Somalia to fight Al-Qaeda-linked group Alshabaab. It is a war he says he has paid for dearly.
Kila wakati kwa ajili ya hii jina ya Al-Shabaab imekuwa Msomali asuspectiwe, lakini Al-Shabaab sio Msomali peke yake.
He is just one of the dozens of Somali nationals who live here as refugees. They have settled and made a home here. To a majority of them, returning to Somalia now is not an option.
And when we have dealt with this matter, there was no any evidence of Somali refugee with these such attacks. We are asking those who don't have the legal documents, they should go back to Dadaab, Ifo, and then make a process to return them to their home.
But the Somali government assuring returnees of a safe environment back home.
You know, when you are taking people, refugees, to their homes, before you relocate them, you have to prepare and for the basic life arrangements. It's not a matter of you are taken tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Kenya has taken several initiatives to leverage international support for repatriation and resettlement of refugees in various international forums like the London Conference, 21st and 22nd IGAD Summit, and recent AU meeting in Addis Ababa.
But Somali nationals who have settled remain unconvinced.
All right, now that's a story that was done by Angel Katusia that is right here at KTN. And it's that time where we get to speak to guests and they let us know exactly what we need to know about Somalia. Now, we've all read about Somalia. We've been there. We've covered these stories. And Somalia is a country that has been ravaged by war. For over 2 decades, you know, this country has gone through quite a lot. And the United Kingdom gives Somalia about £80 million, which is about $124 million in aid every year. But the funding and development are seen as vital to security and also future prosperity, especially among the young. And it has been 2 decades of mayhem for Somalia. And in the recent past, we've seen the Somali conference in London that was basically focusing on rebuilding Somalia. And also we have seen a Somalia conference here in Nairobi that has basically focused on ensuring that Somalis can be able to rebuild their own country, as well as open investment opportunities to the rest of Africa and the world. Now, joining us in studio is Aziz Billow, who is a journalist based in Mogadishu, and he's here to share with us the experience of whether or not it is the right time for Somalis to finally get back home. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too.
Well, I'll get straight to it. Is it finally time for Somalis to go back home?
Yes, the Somali issue has been a tricky issue in Africa for the past 22 years. The country has been in turmoil, actually. There's a high number of refugees who actually fled to neighboring Kenya, others to Ethiopia. The rest eventually went to the United States and Europe. But now things are changing back home in Mogadishu, especially in the Somali capital. Things are changing. Despite the humanitarian crisis still being there of the 2011 Somali famine, many people actually are now supposed to return back home because there's the need for investing back in the country, because a country is the people, and when the country is there and the people are not there, then there'll be little progress or no progress at all. But now it's a time that the Somali community needs to go back home, invest in their country and rebuild their country. And about the time for refugees to go back home, there's a report by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees about the number of refugees coming back to Somalia since January, that they put the figure at 18,000.
Right.
So you can imagine Kenya hosts 500,000 Somali refugees. And in a short span of time, in 6 months that the new government has been in place, we have seen 18,000 Somali families returning back to Somalia. That's progress and the need for Somalis to return back to their motherland.
Well, let me just hear from you. Is it finally time, or can we actually say that Somalia is finally back on her feet, and then therefore people should not be scared of going back home? Because what we're seeing now is mixed feelings. If you had time to actually listen to that story right there, there's some Somalis who are saying, you know what, we actually have been here, we've started our new lives in Kenya, for instance, and it's been 6 years. So now if you're telling me to go back home, I don't have a place to live right now. If I'm going back home, it's going to be starting from scratch. And you see that this is a long journey. Everybody is starting from scratch. So what are the odds that people are going to go back home and still live the same lives that they've been living while in the countries for which they fled to?
Well, for one, the new government under President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, actually it has some pillar plans that it's put in place so that to ensure that the Somali people can live in peaceful and in harmony after the 22 years of fighting. And it's not about Mogadishu alone. Initially, now the government has the upper hand in the fight against the Alshabaab. More towns have been liberated from the hands of the Alshabaab. Talk about Mogadishu now. 2011, the Alshabaab vacated the city under intense pressure from AMISOM. Now we have Kismayo, another cosmopolitan city in southern Somalia, that's a safe haven now for investment. And there's so much tension about the Jubaland standoff right now, but we hope that's going to be solved and the fighting will come to an end, the tension that is there. Now there's so many odds. In the first main challenge is security, definitely. The government in Mogadishu is trying to emphasize on the importance of security. Actually, there have been so many security operations after the recent terror attacks 2 months ago. Actually, there's been no terror attacks, no blast in Mogadishu for almost a month now, and that's creating a peaceful haven. And Somalis are taking advantage of the peace. They're investing, there's construction, the schools are being revived, there are hotels, and we even have Kenyans, real Kenyans, working in the hotels in Mogadishu. You go to a hotel, you find a Kenyan working there. So the Somali community needs to return back and not fear. This is their homeland. Whether you live in the United States, whether you live in Nairobi, whether you live in Dubai, home is where the heart is. Well,
home is where the heart belongs. But then, aside from the fact that we are seeing some people are optimistic, let's also not leave out the fact that there's pessimism as well, on the other hand. And some people cannot be sure that if they go back home, their lives are going to be the same as the lives they started way back in these other countries. And let me just get to the issue of food security. You know, there's been famine, there's been drought in Somalia, and 2011 was one of the worst ever years when it comes to famine in Somalia. And we're looking at a situation where food security is an issue. For people, it's not just about going back home because that's where they belong. It's also about going back home and they're able to feed or probably have over a meal a day. What is your thinking when it comes to food security?
Well, the issue of the humanitarian crisis in Somalia has been there since the collapse of the government in 1991. There have been recurrent famine, but the deadliest famine, according to the humanitarian experts, the worst famine to hit Somalia was the 2011 Somali famine. So thousands of people died and millions others displaced inside and outside the country. The issue of food security still remains. Thousands of displaced persons still live in Mogadishu, the capital itself. So the food security issue will still remain there, but there's concerted efforts by the international community. There's a launch actually in Mogadishu for the first time, a humanitarian appeal launch for aid for Somalia, a 3-year appeal actually to counter any other recurrent famine that might come and the challenges that they might pose. The event took place in Mogadishu and was attended by government officials and representative of the humanitarian experts. So they asked the international community to give $1.3 billion for the humanitarian relief for the next 3 years. But food security still remains there. The IDPs there. We have several aid agencies are there. But it's going to take time. We need to relocate the IDPs, and there's the flooding in southern Somalia. So many challenges for the new government as well.
Right. Well, challenges for the new government. And let's just take a look at what some of you are saying. And when we return, we're going to be talking about the investment opportunities in Somalia. Shoaib Ismail says there's a ray of hope and Somalia citizens are optimistic there would be no reversal of their gains. And Jonathan Marias says Somalia is still nursing its injuries flat on the ground. It needs a lot of attention to get back on its feet. And we also have Adenki Birik, who adds, absolutely yes, Somalia is back, and us Kenyans should position ourselves to take advantage of the emerging opportunities. George Kisundi tweets, only when the competing militia and clans work together, then Somalia will stand. Mahmoud Mohammed Noor says yes, but if outsiders keep poking their nose in its political affairs, then I'm afraid to say it will go steps backward. Well, those are some of your responses in regard to rebuilding Somalia and starting a new life for Somalis. And in studio, yet again, we have Abdul Kadir Hussein, who is the MD for HAS, that is HAS Petroleum, and he's here to tell us about the investment opportunities in Somalia. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Let's talk about the investment opportunities in Somalia for now, as Somalia reconstructs and rebuilds.
Somalia, as we all know, has been through, a long time, 20 years of civil war, and they're beginning to rise from the ashes, so to speak. And there's considerable opportunities, particularly for reconstructing that economy,
yes,
be it infrastructure or the various sectors of the economy. And in that respect, we as Kenyan companies, we're also taking advantage of our geographic proximity to Somalia, and looking over the area and seeing where we can invest. And about 3 weeks ago, I did meet a Chamber of Commerce group, the Kenya Chamber of Commerce Mombasa branch. We met in Mogadishu in a hotel whilst they were discussing things with the Somalia Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
And that was interesting. They were taken around, and they were also taken to our site where we are, along with local oil marketing companies in Mogadishu, building a 39 million liters depot, a storage oil terminal for receiving products,
yes,
oil products, which is our specialty.
Great. And when it comes to, petroleum and all the other industries that are open for investment, how long do you think it's going to take for Somalia to fully, comfortably say that, look, now this is what we need and this is where we've always wanted to be? How long do you think this is going to take?
I think it's going to be, multitasking and differential speed. Different industries will come with different sort of challenges. But it's good to know that their port is very functional. In the petroleum sector, we're putting up the storage. But even without storage, people were receiving product through makeshift systems. The great need is for the infrastructure to be built. And that is being done through, I suppose, donor aid from the Turkish groups, the European Union, and so on. That is the bit that will take a little while. But notwithstanding that, it is interesting to note that the local people have had to make do with what they had, so that even there is no shortage, say, of electricity for housing and the shops and so on, because people have created small generators to service different areas of Mogadishu.
Right. So when you look at Somalia in the current state that it is, do you think it's the right time for Somalis to be going back home to rebuild the country? Or if I might put it in a better way, can we comfortably say Somalia is back on its feet?
Yes, it's back on its feet, but it's not, it's not like, you're going to hit the ground running. It will take time, but, so things have to start at a certain point, and this is the time to get in on the ground floor. And we would encourage our Kenyan colleagues and any other potential investors to take advantage of the opportunities that are in place, partnering with the locals. There are, I guess, there are daily flights into Mogadishu. The shipping is working very well. There are people looking at investment in the power sector. They have some of the cheapest telephone communication, presumably because of the absence of taxes.
Right.
But I suppose once the government is in place and taxes are levied, then they will come to level. But I think there are very good, and the people are very enterprising, as they say, and war tends to hone people in survival mechanisms, and people have tended to survive the exports. I was amazed to see that dried lemon was being exported out of Mogadishu to the Gulf area.
Right. Well, thank you so much. It was an honor speaking to you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed.
That was Abdikadir Hussein, who is the MD for Haas Petroleum. And he was speaking to us about the investment opportunities in Somalia. As it appears now, of course, there's a ray of hope for Somalia. And that brings us to the close of the show. Wish we had more time to talk about Somalia. But be sure that this conversation is ongoing on Twitter at KTN Africa Speaks and also on Facebook Africa Speaks. Continue the discussion under the hashtag Rebuilding Somalia and also Africa Speaks. My name is Doreen Biira. Thank you for watching and have a good afternoon.